the charter rights and freedoms are being heavily, severely, unjustifiably violated all across Canada.
Yeah. Oh, I agree with you. On the screen right now, you can see police with guns in their holsters walking right into a church in Calgary. I think you guys are actually representing this church. I was so infuriated by that act of intimidation, John. These churches are the most peaceful places imaginable. These aren't Hell's Angels biker clubs where cops need to go in SWAT team style. The only possible reason for those armed police to walk into a church is for an intimidation factor. And I'm not asking you to speak about that particular church in Calgary because I understand you have a legal process afoot there. But I think that goes to the mindset of these public health tyrants. I don't think it's appropriate that police run their errands for them. I think that's probably constitutionally suspect. But it gives us an insight into the mind of all these public health bosses who are unaccountable, who have dictator-like power, and are taking on the trappings of a police state. Like, it's bizarre to me that in the name of public health, you send in someone with a gun in a holster to a church. That gives away the whole game to me, John.
But it's terribly sad because there are lots of Canadians that they are pro-police. They want to be pro-police. They don't want to see the police defunded. They want to see the police enforcing, the criminal code prohibitions against things like murder and rape and assault and all kinds of other fraud, all kinds of crime. And unfortunately, our politicians have turned the police against the people by passing unjust laws in the name of health orders. And you mentioned the lack of accountability. Well, one of the legal arguments that we are bringing forward in our court actions in Alberta and Manitoba and other provinces where we are now challenging the lockdowns in court is that this is a blatant violation of the Constitution, not just the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, but also the non-charter parts of our Constitution that require that laws be passed by the elected members of a democratically elected legislative assembly. And this is a core component of Canada's Constitution, that you don't have unelected, unaccountable, politically appointed people that are passing general laws that apply to all citizens and just passing new laws every week, every month on a whim, with no democratic accountability. None of these health orders, which violate our rights and freedoms, have been considered, debated, voted on, or approved by the elected members of the Legislative Assembly or the elected, or federally, by the federal Parliament. So this is another issue that we're putting before the courts, in addition to the charter violations.
I'm so glad to hear that. One of the things I find infuriating is when our reporters interact with police, which regrettably we do almost every day, is the police have no clue. In the past, in the before times, police would study the criminal code, or they might know a couple of bylaws here and there. And the laws would basically be the same every week, every month, every year. If there was a big innovation, they would hear about it. They would be briefed about it by their police departments. But these lockdown rules or guidances or suggestions, some of them are just press conferences. Nobody knows what the rules are. The politicians don't know what the rules are. And these cops clearly don't know either. And so they're either guessing or going with their own personal opinion, or just they don't like the cut of someone's jib. So, it couldn't be clear when it comes to protests, for example. Black Lives Matter protests during the pandemic, you literally see cops taking a knee. But anti-lockdown protests, you see cops throwing people in the back of paddy wagons. And there's no consistency in the application of the laws. I don't think the police understand the laws. And I have some sympathy for them because the laws change. Like, do you think the cops really know the difference between a code red and a code gray and a code orange? I don't think that even the bureaucrats who wrote those understand it. And yet I don't see any judges saying, whoa, it's been a year, no more excuses. When this was all ramshackle, hustle, bustle, we could let you have some leeway, but it's been a year now and it's just getting worse. Where are the judges?
We're gonna find out where they are, but I really hope that they're going to fulfill their role of upholding rights and freedoms. That's what the courts are there for. Since 1982, since we've had the charter, the way it's supposed to work is that when politicians, perhaps with good intentions, but also perhaps acting out of fear and panic and without facts, when politicians violate our rights and freedoms, and perhaps have strong public support for doing so, the courts are supposed to be there to say, wait a minute, no, there's no justification, or there isn't adequate justification for these health orders that violate our freedoms to, move, travel, worship, assemble peacefully, associate, and so on. The opening line of the charter, the preamble of the charter, says that Canada is founded upon principles that recognize the supremacy of God and the rule of law. And part of the rule of law, and as you know, Ezra, you're a lawyer as well, several dimensions to the rule of law. One of them is clarity in the law. And yet we get these health orders that say, we should, or it would be best if, as opposed to clear legal language that says must or shall.
Yeah.
And you've got laws promulgated by way of press conferences. I mean, it's a complete disregard for Canada's Constitution. And so I'm hoping that judges will not shy away from what might prove to be an unpopular task of upholding rights and freedoms.
I just want to go back to the actual moment when the cops enter the church.
On the screen right now, you can see police.
See, when I first saw this video, I was taken aback because I recognized the Calgary police uniforms right away, and I said, no, it couldn't be Calgary. But of course, it was. Let me just say that in our city, an experiment in the extent which dictatorial powers can be justified is the experiment that's currently going on. And the Calgary Police Service have been acting less like guardians of the peace and more like stormtroopers all the time. This tactic here, where you see them walking in to show members of the congregation that the police are there, you see people here gathering. They yearn to return to a state that's normal. And here you see this peace officer, for example, taking pictures to identify who's there, that they're congregating and whatnot, so that they can lay fines against all these people later on. It is deeply shameful behavior, yet something that's become commonplace in Calgary, I would say. You're left at a state of uneasiness because the police are not acting anymore out of the protection of citizens. It's more like a executive order is going to let them change how they behave publicly, so that it's more about we enforce, even with that excellent point that the law is actually unconstitutional, because I never thought I'd see the day when policemen would actually march into a church and look at how they come in. To march into a church to try to intimidate people, as if to show, you need to break this up now, or we're going to bring more officers in here, perhaps. Oh, there you go. What I can say is this. If people don't stand up against this kind of thing and take notice that it's happening, this is going to become the new norm. This is not going to go away. COVID, for me, is nothing more than the pretense for political leaders to abuse their power, at least from what I've seen. And here in Calgary, it's no exception. The police are here to protect us and to keep the peace, whilst at the same time they need to be on the lookout for, well, exactly what they said, murderers or rapists or whatever. But it seems that the police have been, I guess their point of interest has been adjusted, and they are no longer behaving in accordance with the protection of citizens, you could say. It's gone way, way, way past that. And I like what they talked about here. You notice that when he brings up the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, that the supremacy of God is first, ahead of the respect the rule of law. I'm just trying to find the exact place where it was. Here it is. Whereas Canada is founded upon the principles that recognize the supremacy of God and the rule of law. I believe he said it was the first one. The supremacy of God, which means the right to worship if you choose to. This COVID-19 has separated for us the freedom of choice to conduct ourselves as we see fit, and forced us by mandate to shut down literally everything with little to no warning and no idea when things are going to open again. And one of the things that I remember about H1N1 was that we had lockdown protocols, and we were advised to social distance and to hand sanitize as often as possible. And then there was dispensing stations all over the place, and we continued like that. But businesses remained open, and you could say one can't be compared to another. But I disagree. I think the only difference is the policies in which the government was able to enact, in which one government had the power to essentially behave like this government does now, with complete discretion in terms of modifying the laws, and they didn't. They actually withheld and didn't overreach their power. And the government that we have now took full advantage of, let's say, increasing their rule, increasing their mandates, and over-restricting the rights and freedoms of everyone. And as a result, we now live in something like a police state, because it's I just can't understand for the life of me why on earth more people are not disturbed as I am, and I'm deeply disturbed by it, that the protocols that governments are implementing are actually against our freedoms laid out in the Constitution. They don't have the power, and what they have is the power of fear, which they've weaponized. The COVID virus, that there can be no doubt there's some severity in certain degrees, certain cases. But for the mass population, it shouldn't be the government's right to determine how we as individuals will conduct ourselves. That power should remain with the autonomous individual, and they can only recommend what we can do, but they cannot enforce what we do. And this is a blatant show of force. Okay? Not even 2 weeks ago, Keenan Bexty was interviewing Polish people who were gathering in a support group, and that is legal by the Constitution, and they were fined. So you can see that here in Calgary, the police are operating outside the bounds of protection and are moving to a more aggressive stance, using COVID-19 as the cover, the pretense to justify that authority and that power. And I wish I could see the whole video. I don't know, this clip is unclear about exactly what happened before or after. Thank whoever took this video and identified I guess it was one of Rebel's reporters or somebody uploaded it to Rebel, but it is a blatant violation, not with in regards to protecting the law. They're protecting the law above protecting the individual rights of citizens. And it says right there in the Constitution. So this isn't really a COVID. They can pretend it's to justify and to protect against COVID, but what it really is an overstep to prevent freedom of religious expression and freedom of worship. And I'm terrified about what could happen if this kind of thing keeps going under the radar. So few Canadians that I see and that I talk to would know about this, and I feel ashamed and embarrassed that that's the case, and I hope that doesn't remain so. People want to continue and live their lives as we enjoyed before, but we will not see that again, I'm telling you, unless people are going to stand up. The Supreme Court that when Ezra Levant was talking about, I don't really think the Supreme Court has the courage to do anything. I don't think so, because they would have done so already. I think that the cases will be brought to court and most of them will be thrown out, because the new regime is what matters, not people's freedom. So this is shameful. And I wonder what kind of backlash they're going to suffer. I wonder about that. Calgary, New York. Actually, in New York, there was a similar uprising, but not exactly uprising. What would you call it? A litigation against the tyranny of what Cuomo was trying to enforce in New York. And I believe Jewish and Catholic churches gathered together to litigate, and they actually won in court that what the new laws were actually unconstitutional, in accordance with the rights and freedoms of people for worshiping. So they pushed back and they won. So I hope something similar happens here. The effort that John Carpay is putting in with his team, I admire those people, and I hope they win. Again, I wish it received more publicity. I really hope it goes viral. So few people really, it's hard to find people that care about such things, but it's really a severe and drastic action that they're taking here. It's not necessary. And I guarantee you that these people will be fined. It's absolute certainty. So I think I'll conclude the video with that. That's it's horrifying to watch. Look at these people trying to worship in peace, and they're going to get them for mass violation and distancing violation, and but really, how long is the lockdown going to last before we realize that things have to open up permanently and go back to the way they were? Or do they feel that things never have to change so long as they word it properly and intimidate us properly into the proper behavior? I'm sickened by it. If any police officers are watching, I urge you, please, even though it's your duty and responsibility to operate in the confines of your job, your moral standard comes ahead of it. Your ethical standard comes ahead of it, and you know it's wrong. Even if issued from the top down, it doesn't matter. You know that this kind of behavior is unacceptable and an infringement upon the character of the Calgary Police Service. I know many of you are honorable people. You cannot stand for that. Thank you for watching.